Thank you for tuning in to the Stuff I Heard podcast. I'm your host, Josh Peak, and today happens to be Saturday, the 12th of September, 2020. Kind of a big day. We are one day past 9/11, the anniversary of the attacks on New York City and America, the Pentagon, Pennsylvania. I'm sure a lot of you remember what happened. I'm sure a lot of you have forgotten what's happened. I'm sure a lot of you probably weren't even born when it happened. See, that's the thing about tragedy is when it happens, you're immediately impacted. You're immediately aware. It affects you. We've talked about a lot of things on this podcast. We've talked about George Floyd. We've talked about Breonna Taylor. We've talked about the fact that there's a lot of injustice right now going on still today with the different races of Black, white, Chinese, Irish, I mean, whatever, Mexican, you name it. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what your storyline is, what your us versus them reality is. I don't want to downplay it. I don't want to say that it's a myth. I don't want to say that it's not real. It is real. It's totally real. It's real in such a weird way for me because I feel like an observer at times where I want to have an impact. I want to be able to change things, but I'm a human and I'm flawed and I'm oftentimes not in a position to say the right thing or not in the mindset to say the right thing or not in the frame of mind to step up. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm 46 years old right now. And if I were faced with some of the things that I were faced with when I was younger, I would have a totally different approach on things. I would have a different way of addressing it. I would have a different way of addressing people. I would be less afraid. I was afraid at times. I have been in groups where I hear somebody say something very off color, just ugly, just demeaning, just awful. And I've gone along with the group to think, I don't agree with that, but I also don't want you to punch me in the face. I've had a few occasions as I've gotten older where I have been able to say something. I have been able to intercede. I have been able to be the jerk in the room that doesn't agree with everybody. And that wasn't always the case. I don't know why, but this week I really got to be thinking about years ago. I was working for a company, and for whatever reason, it wasn't the company I'm with now. I was with a company and I was teaching a new guy because apparently I have a knack for that. I've been doing it, whether in an official capacity or not, since, I don't know, the last 20 years with whatever job I've had. And I remember I had a guy with me who was a big dude. And something was said. He saw a young Black woman with a mixed colored baby and their white dad. And he said something off color about the kid. And he kept calling the kid. He said, "Look at that, look at it, look at it, look at it." Like he was just, like he felt like I was on his side or something. Like he wanted to point at them as though they were odd, as though they were evil, as though they were bad. And that verbiage really rung in my head. I was a much younger man then, and I did not know what to say. I'd never heard somebody go out of their way to do that. But he kept using the term zebra. He kept saying, "Look at that zebra. Look at it. Just look, just." And he was mad. Like he was angry. Like something in his soul was dark and ugly and made him feel like he needed to look at them a different way. Like he needed to somehow make their life smaller so that he felt bigger. And I had a confrontation with him. I had words with him. It wasn't the words I wanted to use. It wasn't the words that I could use today. Obviously, the older you get, the more you learn how to use your words differently. But it ultimately ended up in him being fired. Um, and I feel good about that. I feel good that in some way I affected the fact that this jerk wasn't going to be allowed to come into contact with people, because I thought at some point he's going to represent the company and he's going to be this jerk to somebody else. And I was thinking about protecting my job, protecting the solace of whatever sense of, I don't know, I don't know what you call it, solidarity with the company, protecting their image. But it was more than that. I knew instinctually what he said was wrong. I knew instinctually that what he was feeling was wrong. But he was an older guy, so much older that I without even considering it, thought it doesn't matter what I say, he's not going to listen to me. Like he's had a lifetime of feeling a certain way about people, and for whatever reason, he has these blinders on to think that this is completely wrong. He's been institutionalized to think that this is wrong and to say something. And for whatever reason, I guess I look like the poster child of his buddy that he can go, hey, look at that. Hey, look, hey, you believe that? Really? Now, to be fair, because I have to look at things in different ways, I was taught that. Luckily, I had people around me growing up who made me believe and think about what you were saying and how you were saying it, and to put yourself in somebody else's shoes once in a while and go, what would it be like to be them? What's their reality? And to have apathy and empathy. And so when you do that, you tend to argue different viewpoints in your mind. You tend to go, how would that make me feel if that were me? What if it were my wife? What if it were my daughter? What if it were my mother? What if it was me? And I think that somewhere along the way, a lot of people have lost their ability to empathize. Is that the right word? Empathize? They've lost their ability to put themselves in other people's shoes. They've lost their ability to think about what they say and how it affects people. And even when you are thoughtful about it, sometimes you don't say the right things. You can try, but sometimes you get it wrong. I do realize that we're in a very volatile point in our history where difficult conversations have to happen. And this might be one of those. This might be one of the small stones that gets put into the river that eventually forms the river to flow in the right direction. I don't know. I, for whatever reason, I have people that listen to this, and thank you so much for listening. And I promise this won't be a heavy podcast. I just wanted to talk about this for a second. 9/11 just happened. We had an anniversary. There was a time where we were patriotic. There was a time where we believed that we could come together and do the right thing for the right reasons and put aside our petty differences and realize that we are all here trying to make a better life, trying to be better people, trying to provide for our families. And listen, COVID has a whole new wrinkle to this thing because we are putting masks over our face and we are basically removing ourselves from the collective. We are taking away our identity in a way. It's hard to empathize with somebody when you can't see their mouth. I had a guy with me this past week, and he was upset over something I had no control over. And I tried to relate to him on a level and explain to him how he could fix the problem and the fact that I really had no control of the problem. And if he just wanted to have me hear it, I would listen, but it's not going to fix the problem. But I couldn't see his mouth to determine whether or not he understood what I was saying. He didn't move his eyebrows. He had one of those stoic face kind of things from the eyebrow down, or from the eyelid down. He didn't flinch. I didn't know if he was smiling. I didn't know if he was calculating. I didn't know if he was considering it. If I could see his mouth, maybe he was going, or, oh yeah. Couldn't tell. Maybe it helped him. I don't know. But we're removing ourself, removing that image that we have of each other, that connectivity with each other with these stupid masks. Now, listen, I know there's a lot of people out there that legitimately have medical concerns. You have family that has medical concerns. A lot of you have had COVID and gotten over it. A lot of you haven't. And in which case, if you're still listening to this, that's a miracle. Please let us know. We'd like to know about that, how that works. Um, Listen, that's a joke, okay? It's not intended to hurt anybody's feelings. I'm sorry. But still, I mean, I read on Google yesterday that Universal has decided that they're going to lift all restrictions. They're basically saying, come on in the park on this date. We're going to lift restrictions. And if you guys want to wear masks, sure. If you don't, we understand. But we're still going to wear masks as employees to make sure you guys are safe. And we're still going to wipe stuff down and that kind of stuff. Okay. Disneyland has kind of said the same thing. Disney World is right on board with that. They're like, yeah, we're going to do that too. It goes back to that conversation we had before. Do we err on the side of caution and end up with 60% of the population without jobs? Do we have homeless people all over the world, all over our country? At what level are we willing to take this? Because let's just say that this was a planned thing. Let's just say that COVID was planned, whether it's political or whether it was regime change or whether it was a country plotting against us or whether it was like a paperclip issue where our own country was designing this thing to have their own influence over us. I watched Joe Rogan's podcast from his new studio with Adam Curry, the very first one from the new studio. I have some thoughts on that, but let me get to that later. Okay. Adam Curry went on this rant about how the Federal Reserve is working with the government and the post office to get us all on a socialist type income system where we get money not from a bank, not from the government per se, but from this other thing. It's like a Bitcoin but different. And Adam Curry, listen, Adam Curry's been ahead of the curve on a lot of things when it comes to technology. He was ahead of the curve when it came to podcasts. Podcasts wouldn't be a thing if he hadn't invented it. He is the podfather. He is the first. He is the alpha in podcasting. And if you watch the interview with Joe Rogan, this is the second one that he's done with Joe. He has Tourette's, and it's hard to watch because he flinches a lot when he talks because it's a disorder in his nervous system where it causes synapses in his brain to misfire and it causes his body to physically twitch at times and his eyes to twitch and he does the thing with his head. It's just a system of Tourette's. Okay, has nothing to do with his mental capacity or his ability to do anything. It's just something that happens. It's hard to watch, I'll be honest. Okay. I like the guy. I really like the guy. But he's getting older. And you got to imagine that back when he thought of not iTunes, when he thought of podcasting, he thought of having control of your own content and being able to put it out there into the world. It was something that wasn't even thought about. I mean, in the first podcast, he talked about coming up with the MTV.com and he talked to MTV about it. He says, hey, I got this website. If you guys want it, like we can work out a deal or whatever. And, I'd like for you guys to run it. And they were like, nah, we got MySpace. We'll be fine. He was like, okay. Or they said they had AOL. We have AOL. We'll be fine. Okay. I mean, he owned a company that ended up being Ask Jeeves that he sold for a fortune. Ask Jeeves morphed into what is now, I think, Bing is what it morphed into, which Bing is awful. But Google perfected it. Now, whether you're one of those conspiracy theory people out there that believes that all that stuff is just data collection and they're soaking up all your information for a reason, yes, you're absolutely right. Does it work great? Sure. Do I prefer it? Absolutely. Is it still sort of nefarious in ways that we don't quite understand? Yeah, probably. Do I care? No, not really. That's it. See, most of the public don't care. Adam Curry still cares. He still has a flip phone. He still doesn't want to be able to be contacted or tracked. To him, that's the most precious thing. And according to all of the things that I see on social media, data is the most important thing. The collection of your data, how you shop, when you shop, what you shop for, what you're interested in, turns into dollars, turns into revenue, exponential possibilities of revenue that people don't even consider. Does that mean it's evil? Not necessarily. Could it be used for wrongful purposes? Yeah, probably. But now this guy who's on the forefront of this stuff is now talking about the post office being tied into a Federal Reserve type Bitcoin payment system for universal basic income. There's been a lot of discussion of this. There's been a lot that I've heard on podcasts, mainly Joe's, but different people have come in and talked about things they've heard, things they're hearing in the wire, things that they're coming up along on the dark web, things that are developing, and there's some truth to it. What's it going to mean for us? I have no idea. But what if all of this COVID stuff was just a front to get people on board with waiting for their check to arrive? How many of you guys out there have had to go on unemployment during this crisis? I mean, I know here in our house, my son and my wife were laid off. How many people out there lost their income completely and have probably lost their house? If you don't have any income coming in, how are you going to pay your bills, right? So you wait by the mailbox and you go online and you register and you're like, come on, just I'll do whatever. Just pay me. Just you need me to do this? Okay, I'll fill it out. You need me to do this? Okay, I'll fill it out. Just pay me. Pay me, pay me, pay me, pay me. I need some money. Now, luckily, I have a job that is somewhat recession proof. I work in the food industry. People need food. I deliver food. Hey. Does that mean that I am immune from any of this? No. I'm lucky. I'm luckier than most. But if you were to look at the income level of people in America, I'm in, I guess you would say that I am better than most for their income. And because of that, I am less affected than someone who maybe makes, let's just throw it out there, 20,000 less than me. Okay. For 20,000 less, that means you have a lower quality of life. You have a lower quality of things that you can afford. And it makes your struggle a little bit harder. I heard Dave Ramsey say that if a two household income is more than $30,000, then you're in the top 1% of the world's financial wealth. 30,000 a year for two people connected to total. You're in the top 1% of the world's income. It just makes you realize when that is said out loud, like a statistic, that we are doing way better than we thought we were. But also, we live in a Instagram lifestyle of keeping up with the Joneses or trying to outdo our neighbor and quote unquote live your best life, when a lot of times all you have to do is put your head down and do the work and just hope that you can feed your family. I've lived that life. I've done it for a lot of years. That's why I'm where I am now, because I realized I didn't want to do that anymore. I got lucky. God blessed me. I had an awesome opportunity to go work and make better money, and I took it. Was it easy? Absolutely not. It was horrible. It was rough. It is unrelenting. It is doing the uncomfortable thing all the time. It is constantly not knowing when you're going to sleep, how you're going to sleep, basically being a psychotic worker bee, but it paid off because of that work mentality, that strap on your boots, that whether it's raining, snowing, 120 degrees with humidity, wearing a mask in stores, no matter how your day is set up, still doing the job and getting it done well, doing your best job matters. Now, if I were the country, we'll just say the country, not necessarily ours, but let's just say that I wanted to force people to go more towards a socialist mentality. It's a good conspiracy theory to think of, well, let's just go ahead and separate more people into poverty so that they'll be more accepting to just jump on board with this. Because if I'm honest, I am not in the middle ground of people out there with their work mentality. I am in the top percentage of people out there with their work mentality. I'm the outlier in a lot of ways. I'm not alone either. I work with a lot of people just like me. Mainly because I didn't want to be mediocre. I didn't want a mediocre life. I wanted more. I wanted to be able to dictate where vacations were or how vacations were. I wanted to be able to know that my gas tank never had to be bought on a credit card again. I wanted to know that I could buy groceries not on a credit card ever again. I've done that. I've had to do that. I lived that way for a long time when I had a mediocre life and a mediocre job. But if I were still at that job, yeah, right now I would be begging the government to hand me some money. And a lot of people are. So we have panic in our country over how to feed our families. We have a worry about what they're going to do for their kids. We have a lot of grown children living at home. Good example, right upstairs. Raising kids in their grandparents' home, and they're. And if it weren't for families pulling together, or for churches pulling together, or communities pulling together, there'd be a lot more homelessness than there is. So, big question here is, was the government involved? Was China involved? Was Russia involved? Were we involved? We've lived in a time of peace in this country for so long that we forget the fact that our human race has been at war forever. Forever at war. Why? For resources, whether it's food or water, people, rare minerals, drugs. So, you may ask yourself, what does that got to do with me? Everything. Everything. Your choices. What you decide to do with it. What you want to do with it. You can do anything. The thing we're missing the most is expanding our community. I have a group of people, a group of friends that extends beyond my closest friends. I have friends that I work with. I have friends that I live near. I have friends in my community. I have friends that live far off that is on YouTube. I have friends far off that listen to the podcast. There are people that I come into contact with. We have an unknowing, unsaid language that when we talk to one another, we kind of understand where each other come from. I don't have to use a lot of words to explain that I'm here for you, that you're here for me, that I understand what you're going through, and you understand what I'm going through. And when it comes down to it, when it's time to do something, we do it, right? We all do, whether we want to admit it or not, whether we realize it or not. This is something I had when I was in the Marine Corps because it didn't matter if I knew the person or not. We had the same uniform on. We had to go through the same training. We had the same goal. And when you were told to do something, you followed through. And you knew that your brother or your sister there was going to follow through as well. Didn't matter their color, their race, where they came up, where they're coming from. You were in the big green machine and you had one motive, and that was go forward. So here's sort of the challenge. Can you do that now? As a civilian, can you do that now? I guarantee you, if another country decides to invade this country, there is a lot of expatriates out there and a lot of rednecks and a lot of gangsters that are going to band together and go, not on my street. But that's not the way it's going to happen. They'd be foolish to do that. Why risk people's lives when ultimately what you want is their money? The new war is not going to be fought with a defense budget. It's not going to be fought with guns and tanks and planes and submarines and nuclear bombs. It's going to be done through land ownership, through business ownership. We willfully gave up jobs to other countries because we wanted to have cheaper goods. We willfully accepted it. We invited it. And then we ended up with a whole bunch of people without jobs. We have more separation of people of wealth and people without. We're distancing each other social economically. And what happens to the poor? What happens to all of us who are struggling? Well, oftentimes they're victimized. It's just seen as casualties of war. We have to change the narrative. We have to stop looking at each other as so different. I've gotten into a couple things this week. I'm going to change the subject here just a little bit. Let's pivot. Let's talk about Joe Rogan, okay? Joe Rogan's new studio looked cool in pictures. I'll be honest, on the video, it looks awful. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the lighting, if it's the closeness of the quarters, if it's the cameras in Super HD. It seemed to have lost something. He talks about in the interview with Adam Curry that in his old studio he had a giant American flag behind him, and people are like, "Fuck yeah, man, America, yeah," And he was like, "I like being American. It makes me proud. I come from immigrants, Irish and Italian immigrants, and but they were proud to be Americans, and I'm proud to be American." But the new design looks distracting. To me, it takes away from the feel of the conversation. I don't know. He spent a lot of money on it. I mean, I'm sure. I'm just not a fan of the new look. But it's a new phase. Listen, I'm not going to be angry at the guy for changing direction. I'm not going to be mad at him at all for trying something new. All we can do is try something new, right? I mean, I've said it before. I'm glad he moved to Texas. That's a good move. It'd be really cool if he moved to South Carolina. Not that I'd accidentally bump into him at the grocery store or anything, and maybe become besties. Whatever. Joe, call me. But you got to take chances in life. You got to try it out. You got to see what works for you, what gets you excited. And it was a big move for him to move, him and his family. He had to get Jamie Vernon to move too, his sound engineer. It's a big change, and it's going to be interesting to see how it morphs. He's still in a metropolitan type city, but he's in an area where people can still travel to easily. with technology the way it is, he's going to figure out how to morph this into something completely different too. And I'm sure that this studio is made for more digital content like I do here with Zoom. He's going to figure out some way to do more video conferences that are streamlined and easier to work, because not everybody can travel to Austin, Texas. I mean, there's going to be people that live in areas they can't quite get to. There's going to be people that don't want to get on a plane wearing a mask, me included. You know, Bert Kreischer's been doing his podcast on Zoom a lot, and it's made him a better interviewer. He listens more. Even he's mentioned it. He's like, I can't believe how much of a better interviewer I am with Zoom, because I actually pay attention to what people are saying. There's something to it. Listen, everything that you think is normal now can change just like that. And you got to be willing to adapt to it. You got to be willing to change directions. That's how we improve as people. That's how we continue to take care of each other and our families and so on and so forth. You got to be willing to adapt and change. So, speaking of adapting and changing, I listened to a Bill Burr podcast this past week, and I listened to 3 of them actually, because I've gotten behind. They got on a subject of, I guess Dave Chappelle is having a comedy festival type thing in Ohio on a regular basis with comedians and musicians. And Dave Chappelle apparently turned Bill Burr onto a musician. I'm going to butcher this guy's last name. His first name is Tobe. His last name is Nwigwe. Nwigwe. It's Nwigwe. And they talked about this on the podcast. This guy is a rapper. Him and his wife rap together. She's very talented. They have a few kids. The first song that they introduced was "Eat." Not that they introduced it, but the first one I was introduced to is the song "Eat." And I've sent it to some friends. I think it's fire. I think it's awesome. There's something about it that really kicks me in the gut and gets me excited about music again, gets me excited about people, gets me excited about the struggle, the commonality of everyone's pursuit to get better, to do better, to everything I talk about on this podcast. It's everything. It's so good. Toby and his wife both are amazing artists. I love the video. There's videos on YouTube. I've even subscribed to the channel because I've listened to several of the songs, and they're all great. They're all really great. Listen, it's unlike anything I've ever listened to, and I love it. So thank you to Bill Burr and Bert Kreischer for talking about this and for turning me on to it. I think Toby's going to have a huge career in Nwigwe. Did I say it right? In Nwigwe? I hope I said it right. God, it's so good. It's so good. Before I started this podcast, I listened to it like 10 times in a row. I'll be honest. I listened to it over and over and over. And then I started listening to the playlist of their songs, and I went back and listened to it again. It's good. It's really good. I've started following him on all social media, and I'm going to figure out a way to repost it on stuff because it's just awesome. It is what it is. He has lines in that song about basically coming home to being poor. Bed frame on the ground, cinder blocks. Striving to get better, trying to protect his family, trying to do the right thing, being targeted because he's a black man, can't go out and can't go for a run because if you run, you get shot. Real struggle type issues, real life issues. He's raising kids. One of the coolest parts about the video is at a certain point, his little kid comes in the picture and he picks her up, and is dancing around with her and singing. And I was like, oh, look at it. I mean, I'm in the production mind, and I'm thinking how they recorded it, how they videoed it, and it's really smart the way they did it. You just got to watch it. It's on YouTube. Go check it out. It's called Eat, EAT, Eat. Tobe, 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 Nwigwe. Check it out. Tobe, if you're listening to this, you rock, dude. That's awesome. I'm digging it. I'm on board. All right. So they also talked about a show called Cobra Kai that was originally on, I guess, YouTube, was making content. And I had seen it advertised whenever YouTube was like, subscribe now and you can watch our movies and blah, blah, blah. I never watched it until recently because on the Bill Burr podcast, they were talking about the fact that Bill had watched it and it was really great. And I was like, I got to check it out. And it is really great. Each episode's about, less than 30 minutes long. This is basically what happened after the Karate Kid, after the movie, after the blonde head kid gets his face kicked in with a crane kick. He becomes an adult and he has kids or he has a kid, and what happens later? What happens when they have kids? What happens as they get older? How did their life change? How are they facing their new challenges? Where's their headspace? It's really good. It's really good. I'm actually super surprised at how good it is. Pleasantly surprised. I'm really enjoying it. So check out Cobra Kai. It's really, really fun to watch. It's fun for the whole family. I mean, it's it's good. I like it. Also on HBO Max, Raised by Wolves has 2 new episodes. I talked about it on the last podcast how they came out with 3 episodes right off the bat, and I thought, okay, is this going to be one of those, here's your initial look, and then we're going to just release 1 video a week kind of deal? That's not the case with them. They put out 2 this past week, and it's great. It's really great. I talked about before the necromancer woman being able to do the thing with her and like people explode into poofs of blood. Yeah. That's so cool. Okay, so they put out 2 new episodes, and there's a way that she's able to look at her past and how she was created, and it's very interesting. There's more development with Travis Fimmel's character. It takes a different turn, something I wasn't expecting. This is created by Ridley Scott. If you guys don't know, Ridley Scott did Aliens. This is good. I'm enjoying it. I'm really enjoying it. So go check out Raised by Wolves. Also, The Boys on Amazon Prime. They put out 3 episodes to start off the season, and then they're apparently doing 1 episode a week because there was only 1 episode to watch. Watched it last night. It's great. There is a new twist with a new character that I didn't see coming. There's a couple of twists in episode 4 that I didn't see coming. Very interesting show. And it's going to be interesting to see how the change is going to play out as the season goes on. There's a guy that runs really fast. They call him A-Train. His last name is Usher. Like, I looked up his real name. His last name is Usher. I wonder if he's like Usher, like Usher's kin. He looks like Usher. I mean, I just wait for him to bust out the move and yeah. But there's an interesting development with him because in the show, like, he's supposed to be like the Flash, like he's super, super fast. But in season 1, he gets hooked on taking this drug that makes him faster. But it also causes him to have heart failure. There's a weird side effect, and he becomes sort of a drug addict for this stuff. the heart failure then leads to him having problems. And he's kind of a dick. His character is kind of a douchebag. Of course, if you were the fastest man alive, I mean, I could see how that would go to your head. We talked about the fact that this show is basically about superheroes with super problems. They're not just they don't just have superpowers and they're like altruistic. They are really messed up people. He's got some problems. But the show is written well. There's an interesting twist to this that's going to develop, I do believe. I don't know. I kind of see him maybe teaming up to go against somebody else as this develops. It's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to it. There's also a new character called Shockwave. Not to give anything away, but there's a new twist with her that I just learned in episode 4. Very cool. So go check out The Boys. Let me know what you think. If you're watching it too, I'm kind of geeking out about it. It's a lot of fun. So that's it. That's all I got. My wife's birthday's coming up. If you know her, you know it's her birthday. Let her know. Tomorrow would have been my Nana's birthday. Shout out to my Nana, Betty Tanksley. I love you and miss you every day. And I'm going to wrap it up. Y'all take care. Thanks for listening. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe, share with your friends. Go check out Tobe Nwigwe's new music. I think you're going to dig it. And as always, cue the cow.
So I want you guys to give me more likes. Give me more likes.